December 10th, 2005, item number 111. Today's guest is Madge Weinstein from Yeast Radio.
Podcast411.com. Listen different.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Rob, and this is the Podcast 411 podcast. Before we get into the interview with Madge, a couple quick news and notes. First, as always, if you have any audio feedback you'd like to leave us, call 206-666-4357. That's 206-666-HELP. Or you can send audio feedback to podcast411@gmail.com, and that does include tech tips and rants. As I've mentioned on a few previous shows, the Podcaster Con is coming up January 7th, 2006 at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. A couple other seminars that will be featured there, podcasting as a teaching and learning strategy, and another seminar on copyright law and podcasting. So again, go to podcastercon.org to find out more information. Love to see you at the conference. Well, since it's Saturday, we're going to go ahead now and play a tech tip from Michael. Here we go.
This is Michael Carino from DigitalMediaCastExperiment.com with another Podcast 411 tech tip. Have you ever wondered why some audio cables have more contacts than others? This is most apparent with microphone cables. Microphone cables usually come in two flavors, balanced and unbalanced. In fact, this is true for audio cables in general. Most equipment beginning podcasters or the general public use is unbalanced. This is because it's a lot less expensive to build, and for doing short runs in places where audio quality doesn't matter that much, unbalanced is good enough. The difference is, balanced connections are made to be used for long distances or in electronically noisy environments, or just for better sound quality in general. The balanced connections are usually those with 3 contacts instead of 2. They usually come in 2 formats: XLR, which have 3-pin connections and a tubular sheath that's about a ½ inch around, or a TSR connection, which stands for tip sleeve ring, using a 1/4 inch diameter shaft with 3 contact connectors. This is the same connector used for stereo headphones. An unbalanced system can work very well for your needs, and a properly done balanced system will work better. Where people have the most trouble is when they try to mix and match. This usually results in tinny, scratchy, difficult to control audio. If you suspect you have a problem with this, either seek professional help or try to eliminate the mixing and matching. Thank you, Rob, for letting me talk to your audience.
Well, Michael, as always, thank you very much for those tech tips. And the next time, folks, people tell you that you are unbalanced, maybe, just maybe, they're talking about your audio cables. Well, we're going to go ahead now and get into our interview with our special guest, Madge Weinstein from Yeast Radio. I did my best to make this G-rated interview. I may have missed a couple things, so maybe this borders on the line of PG instead of G, and there's certain things I just couldn't take out, so we'll call today's show PG. We're going to go ahead now and get right into the interview. Here we go. Madge, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Now, first off, happy anniversary.
Thank you. It's been 1 year of me podcasting, and I'm so delighted to have made it this far.
Now, I've been listening to you almost a year. I think the first time I heard your show was around December 15th, December 16th. I don't remember if it was Adam Curry mentioned it or how I heard about it, but I remember it was the middle of December.
Yeah, it must have been the first time, because I sent him a promo not long after I started, and then he played it, and that's probably when you heard it.
What was your first computer?
My first computer was an Atari 800.
Bing! That was my favorite computer. I had the TRS-80 first, but it was the Atari 800 that I loved, and I still have it.
You do? Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I have it and all the software. It still works.
I used to drool over the TRS-80 in the Radio Shack, but I couldn't afford it, and the first computer I could actually afford was the Atari 800. So I shelled out some, I don't remember how much money, it was probably like $1,000 then.
On podcasting, what was the first podcast you listened to?
I try to remember that. It's hard for me to remember. I mean, I guess the way it happened for me is I downloaded iPod or Lemon because being a Mac geek, I always looked at Version Tracker, and I saw this thing, the software called iPodder on Version Tracker, and it said something like, download audio content that you subscribe to via RSS. And I thought, well, this sounds interesting. I didn't really understand it. I thought, well, is there actually, where's the audio file? Is it in the RSS? Where is it? It didn't make sense to me. So I thought, well, I'll try it out because I was curious. When you download it, it has some welcome message message from Adam Curry, and I heard that, and I thought, this is Adam, and it said, this is Adam Curry, and I thought, Jesus, that sounds like that guy from the 80s with the hair. That's weird. But then I really don't remember which ones I subscribed to. I know that one of the first ones was Dave Slusher, and I did listen to Adam Curry, was one of the first, but I didn't stay subscribed to him because I thought it was kind of cheesy sounding, I thought, oh, what is this? This is crazy. Yeah, it's him, but this is weird. Like, this guy's just weird. It just sounds like regular radio. So I thought, well, pass. Then I figured out that he's sort of the actual brain behind this, which I thought was even stranger, that here he is, this cheesy sounding radio guy, but he's really the one that's doing all this. So then I switched him back on, but I think it was mainly them, really.
Let's talk about what podcasts you listen to today. What are some of your favorites?
Okay, let's see. Bicycle Mark is one of my favorites. Democracy Now! I always tell people is the most important one to listen to. So I listen to that one first if I don't have time to listen to anything else, because it's the real source of news that you don't get anywhere else. Okay, Adam Curry, of course. I have Attention Tech, Chub Creek, Digital Flotsam, Distorted View, Eat This Hot Show, that's my show, where I do it with Wanda Wisdom and Reagan Fox, two other shows that I work with. Eat Bird, that's Reagan Fox, and Reagan Fox's Fox in the City. He's the funniest podcast in my opinion.
Hemda loves Reagan Fox.
Oh yeah, well,
the girl, she was raving about him.
Yeah, Reagan is his show is the funniest. I mean, he's absolutely brilliant sense of humor. Echo Chamber, well, that's a new one. That's interesting because what he's doing is he's creating sort of an anthology. You should listen to that because he's sort of doing what you do in some ways, in that he's interviewing people about the media. So he's interviewing all kinds of people.
That's Kent By, right?
Right. Oh,
okay.
So you know about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Gilmore Daily. I love the Steve Gilmore, anything IT related. IT Conversations, Mikey Pod, Meet the Press, Jim Lehrer, McNeil News Hour, Norm Augustinus. Open Source is a wonderful show. Pacific Coast Hellway, Pizza Babe. She's an insane woman, that thing. I just had her on yesterday. She's insane. All into domination and S&M. Podcast Brothers I was listening to, some of them I listened to just to figure out how to harass, and that's one of them. I get no enjoyment out of listening to Podcast Brothers. Puffcast, Radio WC, Marvin Suicide, my favorite music cast. Right now, that's it. It changes a lot, and keep in mind, those are just the ones I travel with. So,
well, you just traveled down to Miami, so you had quite a time to listen with you and Chauncey to podcasts.
With all the thousands of podcasts that are out there, there's still not enough of what I really want to hear. Like, my favorite podcasts are the stuff that really dig deep into what's going on in the world. So I really like things like Open Source, like Democracy Now!, like Bicycle Mark. Those are really the stuff I really, really get into. This
will segue us into your show. And I'm guessing that many people don't realize how deep you get into things on your show. I mean,
oh, yeah, sure.
I'm sure almost everyone that's listening to this podcast has heard of your show. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how many of them have actually listened to your show.
Right. I think a lot of people view me as sort of an Adam Curry sidekick, or sort of like, one of these bits on Adam Curry's show, like one of these freaks on Howard Stern, like that kind of thing. For me, the thing I like about podcasting is I don't have to be anything. I can define it as myself. And I think part of the reason why Adam picked me up is because I was particularly useful in them getting these venture capitalists interested, which is kind of ironic because a lot of people view me is so frightening to advertisers, and that may be true in some ways, I'm not sure. But I'm very attractive to venture capitalists because I provide an example of what you can do in podcasting that you cannot, or at least has not been done in traditional media, in that I create a show where I just do whatever the hell I want. So it's not anything, I don't have to apply a label, I don't have to be the Howard Stern of this or the Joan Rivers of that, because one day I can be, toilet humor and just disgusting misogynist pig, and then the next day I can have an interview with somebody like Kent By and talk about the media, and then I can interview Amy Goodman, and then I can talk about, pornography and what it means, and then I can just have a disgusting sexual conversation with somebody else. It's completely boundless. Just like podcasting, you can do absolutely whatever you want. I don't really feel like I have to be defined in any way at all. And my dog keeps farting. It's disgusting. I had to say that, or it'll just undermine the conversation.
What made you want to do a podcast?
this is one of the things that a lot of people seem to forget. I cover this in a lot of interviews, but for some reason it gets ignored. But I actually started Yeast Radio in 1997, but it didn't go anywhere. It was a real audio streaming server thingamajig. If you go to the Wayback Machine over at archive.org, you can find it. And I can't remember the URL. It was like yeastradio.thmc.org, I think. But it was there, and it was all inspired by the author William S. Burroughs, and I would just play like different mixes of like weird music and and interviews about vaginal yeast, of course, and so that was really the beginning of it. But it didn't go anywhere because there was sort of a limited scope in what I could talk about related to vaginal yeast. Plus, I was just not all that interested in doing it myself. So Yeast Radio happened for a few months in 1997. Then I left, moved to Amsterdam for 2 years. And that was it. Then, what really triggered it, now, the Yeast Radio started on December 5th, 2004, because that's when I did the first podcast. But the real inspiration for this incarnation of Yeast Radio actually started on Election Day 2004, because George Bush won, as you may know. George Bush won the election, and I was so angry, because I really didn't think he would win. And to tell you the truth, I really don't think he did, but that's beside the point. But I was so angry that I was my blood was boiling, and I didn't know what to do with my anger. Now, I'd been making videos for a while. I periodically would turn on the video camera and say funny things, haha, make beans or whatever. And what I did is I turned on the La Cage aux Folles soundtrack and dolled myself up, made myself look real pretty. And then I sat down with the video camera and I just vented. I just let it all out, and I just spewed out my disgust with the American people. And that was the difference between that's how my anger had changed. My anger before had been directed mostly at the president. My anger changed in November of 2004 and became directed at the American people for allowing it to happen, because that's whose fault it was at that point, to allow for this. And I just spewed it all out. And you can see this. It's somewhere on my Yeast Radio blog, and it's also on insanefilms.com, my video blog, which was removed without explanation from iTunes. That was really the inspiration. I found that after I did that and after I vented, it was about a 10-minute video of me complaining about George Bush, that I felt really, really fine, that I had this sense of serenity, that I felt totally at peace with myself, with the world. And it was as if I knew that I didn't feel like anything was going to be all better. I didn't feel like that Bush was going to be out of office, or that we were going to achieve world peace, or everything was going to be fine. I just felt like as if it's kind of like a person who realizes they have cancer and they're going to die from it finally accepts it, but they're going to go on with their life and still, live life until it ends. And that's really how I accepted this presidency and this situation that, we have a terrible situation and it's terminal, but to just live life, but see it for what it is, and to see it and not live in denial. So I decided that I'm going to point out everything in this world that I see as wrong, see it for what it is, instead of doing what I think most Americans do, which is create this fiction, this false reality, which is completely ridiculous, so incredibly false that most people are in it. And I think occasionally people slip out of it. I think John Murtha fell out of that reality, and it was huge. And when he fell out of it reality, he got a huge dose of humanity, and he realized, wow, people are actually dying in these wars. People are actually dying. Cindy Sheehan saw it. That's why she's going to Hillary Clinton and saying, when are you going to speak out against the war, Hillary? People are dying. How many more do you have to let die? People that are in this state, this sort of state of unreality, don't see life for what it is. And that's what I'm trying to address. And that's sort of my calling, is to point that out.
Should just mention where to find your show. Now, what's the best place to go and find your show today? Is it Yeast Radio at podshow.com?
Yeah, either that or yeastradio.com. Either way works fine. Yeastradio.com just redirects to yeastradio.podshow.com. So either way works. The only way not to go is through iTunes. Do not go through iTunes to get any of my shows, because you never know if it's going to be there the next day. And that's just, I can't say enough about how wrong that is. There's so many shows that just vanish from iTunes. And when you're that big, you have a responsibility to that, because people like me, and that's my livelihood now. You can't just with people's livelihoods and just remove their shows one day. That's not right. It's not fair. It's not democratic. And I know it's a big system. I know it's difficult to manage. But you got to do it right. You have a responsibility. No excuses. So that having been said, my other feeds are yeast2.com, insanefilms.com, and eatthishotshow.com, which is my group show that's been getting a lot of favorable reactions. That's my group show with Wanda Wisdom and Reagan Fox.
Okay. Now, you and Wanda and Reagan are all part of QPodder.
Right.
Do you want to explain QPodder a little bit to everyone?
Oh, right. I should. Oh, gosh, thank you for reminding me. Yeah, QPodder is a website that it's actually hosted in my house still.
Okay.
It's in my bedroom. I'm a little worried about it since I'm not there, but it's a website for the gay community. I was sort of inspired to do it when iTunes. I try to take negative things and make them into a positive. So when I saw that iTunes came out and it basically ignored the gay community, there was no gay category. And in fact, all the gay podcasts were relegated to the sex category under health. So I felt marginalized as a community. So I created, within a few days of that, this website called QPowder.org, which is a community. It's a Drupal-based community website specifically for gay, lesbian, friendly podcasts. It's for everybody who wants to be in it. We have a lot of people who aren't gay that are in it.
You've got Melinda from My Maryland, who's part of QPodder, and P.W. Fenton from Digital Flotsam.
Soccer Girl, Bicycle Amara, now Pizza. There's a lot of people. So we're not at all exclusive. We're just, queer can be a lot of things. It doesn't mean queer can be you beat people. You know what I mean? For sex. It can be a lot. But we needed it to be so that we have a place. It's a community-based forum. It's not a bulletin board-based forum. It's more blog-based so that we don't encourage all the arguing that goes on in a lot of these forums, like the Podcast Alley forums. I find
arguing goes on there, really?
That's what I found. I personally find that in blog-based forums, it becomes a lot more organic and a lot more friendly and positive than in these bulletin boards where you get all this arguing and people saying nasty things they wouldn't say to each other in person. So it's become a very positive community for people, for podcasters, gay particularly, but everyone, to help each other out. So we help each other get press. We help each other figure out technical issues. We help each other publicize each other's podcasts. It's really great. We also have, as part of this QPodder community, we also have Faggregator, which is an aggregate of all the gay video podcasts, and you can subscribe to faggregator.com and also nellygator.com, which is if you just want to subscribe to all the gay audio podcasts. And that's all reachable from qpodder.org, and anybody can join. And when you join, you automatically get put into the iPodder.org gay and lesbian category.
Technically, how are you recording your podcast today? What are you using hardware and software-wise?
Oh, well, that's so fun for me because that's half the fun, and I'm sure it is for you since you also have been into computers that long. But I'm on the road now, so it's different. But when I'm at home, I use a dual 2.5 gigahertz G5 Power Mac, and I record the software I use, and that goes for regardless of whether I'm here or there, is Live. I use Live 5.0, Ableton Live. Fantastic software. Just started experimenting with Cast Blaster, which is really cool. It's super easy to use for the beginner. I can't recommend it enough, but I use Live, and I use that on the Power Mac. I use for the audio interface, I use Motu A28 MK2. That's the audio interface. It's got a gazillion inputs, so I can put as much stuff into it as I want. Real nice quality. And I use a PreSonus Eureka preamp for the mic. Totally superfluous, but I like it. For the mic, when I'm at home sitting, and I use different mics, throughout the week as I do my podcast, but when I'm sitting at my desk, I use the Electro Voice RE27. It's this broadcast standard mic. It's the same one like Rush Limbaugh uses, Imus uses. You just see it all the time. It's very common in broadcast. I use a control surface so that I can control the faders and levels in Live without having to, it's better for me than a mixer, because when you're using a mixer, then you can't control it after the fact. So I use the Behringer BCF 2000, which is it's cheap. It's only $200, but it emulates a Mackie control mixer and headphones, just normal headphones. But I also have a wireless set, a Sennheiser wireless. I forget, it's like an E2. That's just standard video. It's an EW1000 G2, I guess, a wireless kit for video that I use. And it has a wireless lavalier. It also has an XLR plug that I can plug into any XLR dynamic mic, or, it doesn't do phantom power. And the way that works is when I'm sitting at my desk recording, I use the Electro Voice mic. But a lot of times I'll get up to do stuff, then I'll put on the lavalier, and I'll just switch over to the lavalier mic on wireless. Right now I'm using a PC, I'm using an HP PC running live also. It's one of the things I like about live. It runs on either platform. And I'm using the wireless set. The Sennheiser kit also provides a decent preamp. I use that when I'm traveling, so I don't use an interface. I don't use a preamp, a big preamp. I just use the Sennheiser kit with the XLR. So that's all. Of course, I can't really do interviews this way. I did an interview yesterday on the phone, and I had to use the speakerphone and hold it up to the microphone. It was kind of lame. But
Ghetto recording.
Exactly.
As Drew would say.
Right.
What do you recommend to people to do to try to help promote their shows, especially outside of the podcasting world?
I don't know. I think it's something we need to discuss as a podcasting community, because it's a really good question. But for the people that are already on the net, I would say just get into as many RSS feeds as you can. Get into anything on the net. Google ads, not so much. But do stuff you don't have to pay for.
We talked earlier that you do interviews on your show, and I'd like to end it. I always like to get advice, but I want to put the advice in this case specific to what advice would you offer to people that are looking to do interviews on their podcast?
Just listen. That's all. Just listen. I mean, really listen. You have to just quiet your mind, quiet yourself, forget about the next question, and just listen. And for me, and I think it's important to interview people that you find interesting. I interview people I find interesting. I don't find celebrities particularly interesting. I don't really go after them. A lot of times celebrities will go, and they'll go from show to show promoting a book, and they'll say the same crap, and they're really hard to get. You can't get through their shell anyway a lot of the time. But if I get somebody who I think is interesting, like a local, say, alderman, who really cares about homeless people, she's been dying to have somebody ask her these questions finally, she'll really open up, and I'm really interested in that. Or even like, just a friend who knows something about something, I'm just, anything I'm interested in, that's all, Doesn't have to be anybody famous.
Madge, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Rob, very much. I appreciate it.
Madge, thank you so much for coming on the show. It really was a pleasure talking with you. Folks out there, please check out Madge's podcast at yeastradio.com. And if you haven't checked out Madge's podcast, you really don't know what Madge's podcast is about. So again, check it out, yeastradio.com. And I want to give Madge kudos for turning on her public awareness API in FeedBurner. If you have FeedBurner and you're using FeedBurner and you haven't turned on your public awareness API, shame on you. Turn it on. Coming up at the end of today's show, we're going to play a promo from the Art A Go-Go podcast, so please stick around for that. As always, please leave feedback and voicemail at 206-666-4357. That's 206-666-HELP. Or send them to podcast411@gmail.com. Well, that's going to go ahead and do it for us today. As always, I'm your host, Rob, from Podcast 411, reminding you to listen different.
Hello, art lovers. Welcome to the Art A Go-Go podcast,
your source for art news, reviews, and commentary. Today on the Art A Go-Go podcast, we're going to discuss modernist painter Piet Mondrian's views on the creation of his art.
Piet Mondrian wrote, and I quote, "While in Cubism, from a naturalistic foundation, there sprang forcibly the use of plastic means, still half object, half abstract. The abstract basis of our pure plastic art must result in the use of purely abstract means." End quote.
Huh? Everyone enjoys art, but let's face it, listening to discussions about art can be about as exciting as watching paint dry.
Most information about art is not always fit for human consumption, but there's hope. The Art A Go-Go podcast is here.
The Art A Go-Go podcast brings the art world to you in an entertaining and accessible format.
We feature the latest art news, reviews, and commentary, highlight upcoming museum exhibitions, and try to avoid getting busted by museum security guards.
You can find us at artagogo.com/blog or search for art in the iTunes podcast directory. Want to learn more about art?
So do we. Art A Go-Go podcast. It's art over easy.